So now that we've been making some animated projects, we have to learn how to export these as playable files. And to do this, we have to talk about the render queue inside of After Effects. So this is a really quick tutorial, but we're going to talk about the different formats and presets that we have to export our animations. All right, so I'm going to be using the Blu-ray example that we've been working on so far in the class. So we're going to export this in two ways, one through the render queue and one through Adobe Media Encoder as a GIF. Now, before we start to export projects inside of After Effects, we have to make sure that we set our work area properly. Now, work areas in After Effects are this gray bar right here underneath our timecode. And the work area has these little blue handles on both sides that we can move around and drag about. There's also keyboard shortcuts, B and N, and I think I've mentioned this already in the RAM preview and playback tutorial. So B and N allow us to set our work area, B as the in point, N as the out point, or you can just hover and click and drag. This is important for exporting because if we don't have our work area properly set, it's going to export the entirety of our composition. And sometimes that's not bad if your composition settings were tight to begin with, but if you had maybe a 30-minute composition on accident and you only wanted to export 2 seconds of it, you'd have to make sure that your work area reflects that. So to export this to start, I'm just going to set this to about 5 seconds, since that's a reasonable time after the animation concludes. So after your work area is set, we can now go up to File in the menu bar, come down to Export, it's a side menu, and then choose Add to Render Queue. Now, Render Queue inside of After Effects is a whole different tab or panel. Up in Window, you can see that Render Queue is an option right here. The Render Queue is kind of like After Effects' internal exporting engine. And for a while, it was all we had. I export my simple projects with simple formats and codecs through Render Queue only. Only do I use Adobe Media Encoder when the settings need to be a bit more specific. So when you add something to the Render Queue, and you can add as many compositions to the render queue at a time, hence the word queue. It's kind of nice because then you can just hit render and then it will just start to export all of your compositions that you've preloaded into it. But we have to make sure that our settings are what we want it to be. By default, and I want you guys to hear me on this, by default, it sets to AVI, at least for me on a PC. I'm not sure what it defaults for you guys on a Mac, but an AVI is a ridiculously large file that is clunky on playback and generally doesn't look that good. So if we don't understand how to change our settings and we just go over here and we hit render, we're going to run into some problems, especially as we try to upload those files to Canvas and Canvas is like, yo, that's a huge file, what are you doing? So to change our settings, we want to come over here to where it says Output Module and click on the button that says Lossless. When you click on that, the Output Module's Settings dialog box comes up. Notice again, it says the format is AVI by default. We want to change that. So if I toggle down the format, I have my different formats that I can export in. Now, some of these may look strange and unfamiliar. And that means you probably don't ever need to use them. I almost always, at least from the render queue, export as a QuickTime file. As a QuickTime file, we have some options down here under the video output. First of all, we can change the channels. If you toggle down where it says RGB, we can see that we can export RGB plus alpha, which means if there's a video that has a transparency to it, just like PNG images, you can save those with transparent backgrounds. You can export now your After Effects animations with alpha channels. And so that intro animation that I just played for my stream, notice how the wipe wiped off from the animation and then it showed me underneath it. That was an exported file with alpha. So that's really handy. In this case, we don't have any alpha channels because there's no transparency to our project. So I'm just going to keep RGB. Over here we have the format options. If you click on that, This is where we can change the actual video codec from animation to a whole bunch of other uncompressed options, and Apple ProRes if you guys like to export in ProRes. It defaults to animation, which is 100% fine. I seldom, unless the client specifically asks for ProRes, I seldom change this away from animation. So I keep it there. Notice the best video settings quality is already grayed out to 100%. I'm just going to hit OK. So it's a QuickTime file, just the RGB, so no alpha included, with the animation format. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. So that's now changed the output modules to the proper settings. So now we got to change where it's going to output to. In this case, if I click on this, I can change where this is going to go. So I can navigate to my sample projects folder that I've made, and I'm going to call this Blu-ray export and hit save. So now I've changed the settings to what I want it to be. I've saved it in a certain file as a certain name, and now I'm going to go to render over here. I'm going to go ahead and click on render. It's going to work its way through the animation. And you hear that sound. That sound makes me happy. I'll be like in the kitchen making a sandwich and I hear bring. That means After Effects rendered successfully, and I run and skip back to my computer to make sure that it exported properly. So once it exports properly, you are good to go. And that is now a file you can use, whether in Premiere or upload to maybe YouTube, etc., etc. What are the differences between seldom and animation? High animation quality for the output, says Marcos. What do you mean seldom, Marcos? Go ahead and type in the chat there for me. If you guys have questions, please type in the chat. I'll address those at various points. Now, something to note, the animation codecs aren't super friendly. Animation codecs, unless you're using VLC Media Player for playback, animation codecs will, if you double click them, it will act like you can't play that video. So a lot of times when I'm teaching After Effects and I have everyone export as animation files, I get a lot of messages before they submit their assignment because they panic. They go to play it back and their computer's like, nope, don't know what that is, can't play it. I'm like, oh no, I broke it. It's not broken. Animation files are a bit heavy, but they're high quality. And so if you're not using VLC Media Player, it's a free player, that's one of the best ways to play back your After Effects exports. Otherwise, this next option is going to be better for you if playback and upload is what you're wanting. So let's talk about exporting this exact same project through Adobe Media Encoder. I'm going to go back to my sample project tab. My work area is still set. That's great. I'm going to go up to File, Export, and I could add it straight to Media Encoder from here. I'm going to skip that and come back to Add to Render Queue. So now I've added this project again here. But notice over here on the far right, we have an option that says Queue in AME, Queue in Adobe Media Encoder. So if I click on this button, Media Encoder is going to start to open. And once it does, we're going to see, if I get rid of my previous one, we're going to see this project now inside Media Encoder. Now, if you guys have never used Media Encoder, and if you haven't taken a video class, you may not be familiar with it. Media Encoder is merely an entire program dedicated to exporting files. It used to be only linked to Premiere, but in the last few years they've added After Effects as well, which is really nice because now you can queue projects from multiple programs and export them all. Now, what I want to talk about is the scary things over here to the left. Now, we can click on these and save them just like we did in Render Queue over here. Okay, so the output modules and the output file, where to save this as, I can click on it and save this again as AME export. And then notice the preset is animated GIF. It defaulted to that for me because that's the last preset I used in Media Encoder. So it's already applied it there. But what I want to do is show you how we can drag a preset from over here to our project. So let's say, for example, you wanted to export your After Effects project as an H.264 format and codec. Again, H.264 is great for uploading video files to the web. They're very playable. YouTube converts all videos to H.264 anyway. But we didn't see that option when we were exporting using the render queue. Well, what's great about Media Encoder is that we can use this search feature here and just start typing. And now we see all the H.264 options available to us, including the YouTube 1080p Full HD codec and format that we use a lot in my Video 1 class. So if you see a format that you like, all you have to do is click and drag it to your sample project. And now it's written over. The format is H.264. The preset is the YouTube 1080p that we dragged from here. And I've already saved this in the file as the proper name. And so now I can hit the play button. It's going to work its way through the video. And once it's exported, that's a file that I could more easily upload to YouTube, upload to Instagram, share with friends, etc. An animation format video would not be easily uploaded to Instagram or texted to a friend because they're so hefty and because they're so specific. Now, what's great is we can export animated GIFs of our animated projects really easily through Adobe Media Encoder. So I'm going to come back to my search feature here, start to type in GIF, and now I have some options here. We want to use the animated GIF. So I can click and drag this up to here. Click on that. It resets. Notice I didn't have to go back to After Effects and resend this to Encoder. I've changed the format, and now the green play button shows up again. Now I can hit play. Now it's going to export this as an animated GIF. And this is awesome because you can make a really cool animated GIF, 5-second GIF, custom animation that you can upload to various formats. And I'm using GIFs that I've created in After Effects for my Canvas projects. So it's a really fun way to create custom GIFs in After Effects. I'm going to want you guys to be exporting as GIFs for a lot of your UTry submissions. Because GIFs are so small and it allows me to view your work in a loop, it's going to make for a nice submission file. But now we know how to export through render queue as a QuickTime file, which is the best if you're going to try to bring that back into Premiere to work with, and as an H.264 or a animated GIF file through Adobe Media Encoder. So that's exporting in After Effects.